Well, a very warm welcome to everyone joining this workshop on scientific writing and publishing, which is especially for Indonesian researchers working in disaster risk and related subjects. I'm Professor Richard Haigh from the University of Huddersfield in the UK. It's early morning here, but most of you are joining from Indonesia in the afternoon. We also have speakers and Indonesian researchers joining from other parts of the world, including Australia, Japan and New Zealand, as well as many of our researchers from Huddersfield's Global Disaster Resilience Centre here in the UK. We also welcome others who are joining our live stream through YouTube, and I think the link to that has just been shared on chat, so I'd encourage you to share that with your colleagues for any of you who's interested in joining. Wherever you're joining from, thank you for taking the time to take part in this event, which I hope you will find both informative but also enjoyable. It's fantastic that we've been able to bring so many people together from all over the world. I think normally we would have this event in person, but because of the current circumstances, it's great that we've been able to replicate that in a virtual form. Now, before we start, I'd like to acknowledge the financial support of the UK Parliamentary Undersecretary for the State of Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy, and also the UK Newton Fund, who've provided the means for us to hold this event. I would also like to thank our organising partners for this event, including the Government of Indonesia, the British Council, our friends and colleagues at the Institute of Bandung and the University of Andalas in Indonesia, and Emerald Publishing, all of whom you'll get to hear from during the event. Now, the UK Newton Fund builds research and innovation partnerships with countries in Africa, Asia and Latin America to support economic development and social welfare, and to tackle global challenges and develop talent and careers. And it does this through equitable partnerships with middle-income countries, multidisciplinary research based on agreed national strategies, and nurturing talent and careers with capacity development. Now, the Newton Fund in Indonesia, referred to as the UK Indonesia Science and Technology Fund, was launched back in 2014. And one of the agreed principles for this fund in Indonesia is capacity building for science and innovation, which is very much the basis for this workshop. But why have we specifically focused on scientific writing and publishing in disaster risk and related subjects? Why disaster risk? Well, of course, the Sendai framework adopted back in 2015 contained very strong recognition of the importance of science in the DRR field. And it offers many avenues for the scientific community to help implement the framework. In the aftermath of the agreement, there was widespread acknowledgement that as a community, we must identify the needs and knowledge gaps, co-design, co-produce and co-deliver new knowledge, as well as make science more readily available and accessible. Now, in order to achieve this, science and technology communities and networks must mobilize and strengthen existing capacities to support the implementation of the framework. Now, they suggested this might include delivering outputs in the assessment of current state of data, scientific knowledge, and technical availability on disaster risks and resilience. So, what is known, what is needed, what are the uncertainties? They also looked for a synthesis of scientific evidence in a timely, accessible, and policy-relevant manner, scientific advice to decision makers through close collaboration and dialogue, monitoring and review to ensure that new and up-to-date scientific information is used, communication and engagement among policymakers, stakeholders in all sectors and in the science and technology domains, and capacity development to ensure that all countries can produce, have access to, and effectively use scientific information. Now, there's evidently a tremendous amount of scientific work to be done in contributing to these efforts. And this is especially so in a country like Indonesia, which you'll know better than me, is highly exposed to a range of natural hazards, such as earthquakes, tsunamis, and flooding, as well as the impacts of climate change, such as sea level rise, and of course, highly topical at the moment, biological hazards, such as the current pandemic. Now, we will focus in this workshop on just part of the scientific writing equation, so writing peer-reviewed papers for journals, books and conferences. Now, the peer review process subjects an author's work and research and ideas to the scrutiny of others who are experts in the same field, and it's one way of us upholding the quality and the validity of our scientific work. And I'm sure our speakers and our resource persons will examine the value and the limitations of these publication channels during this event. Now, at various junctures, we will no doubt make reference to wider strategies for the communication of research and engagement, such as through policy briefs, briefing papers and social media. And these are of course vital channels as well, but detailed guidance for these approaches is beyond the scope of this particular event. So looking ahead to the next 2 days, we have a varied programme for Indonesian doctoral students and researchers working in disaster risk and related subjects who are new to publishing or wish to refresh their skills. Now, the event is primarily targeting Indonesian researchers who are experienced or novice, staff or postgraduate, who will have or will soon have research they want to write up for scholarly publication. The important aspect is that everyone here is a researcher working in disaster risk and related subject areas. And of course, the researchers are cross-disciplinary, so they might have a science, a technology, an engineering, mathematics, arts and humanities, or a social sciences focus. And it's been a very deliberate decision for this event to encourage participation from across the scientific disciplines. So this, the Sendai framework promotes very much a multidisciplinary approach to research. And that's in recognition that an all hazards, risk-based, problem-solving, results-oriented approach should be used in DRR research. Now, synergies with climate change, sustainable development must continue and must be articulated and leveraged. This requires collaboration and communication across the scientific disciplines and technical fields. I'm therefore delighted that we have a diverse array of scientific disciplines represented among our speakers and participants. Now, the 2-day programme includes some short keynote addresses and talks from experienced researchers and publishers, specifically on the importance of scientific writing, the publishing journey, the types of publications, and publication ethics. We also have an expert panel discussion that will examine different aspects of the peer review process, a breakout group session looking at good and bad practices for writing different sections of a paper. And then following the event, we'll also have a one-to-one surgery opportunity with a panel of editors and an opportunity for a draft manuscript review. And we'll explain a bit more about that tomorrow. Now, all of these sessions will provide an opportunity for question and answer with the speakers and panel, and will encourage you to actively participate. So there is a chat function in Zoom, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with. So we won't be enabling video and microphone for participants, but instead we encourage you to use the chat function to pose questions to speakers and panels, particularly in the 5 sessions that I've highlighted on the screen. So the keynote addresses, the introduction to academic publishing, the publishing perspective, publication ethics, and the panel discussion. So please do feel free to pose further questions to the experts during the event. A few other points to note: the workshops can be delivered in the English language medium. Sessions are going to be recorded and archived for future reference, and we'll make copies of slides available electronically after the event. Now, we very much hope you find the event useful, and in particular we hope that you'll develop skills and knowledge in relation to developing writing skills and confidence for writing journals and other peer-reviewed outputs, understanding editorial processes and what editors look for in papers, understanding bibliometrics, quality and impact indicators, and learning best practices for submitting a paper and completing a peer review. Now, I very much look forward to meeting and engaging with you over the next few days and sharing some of my publication experience as an author, but also as a journal, book and conference proceedings editor, and as a peer reviewer for many journals. I'd now like to hand over to my good friend and colleague, Dr. Harkunti Rahayu from the Institute of Technology Bandung, who I've been working with on a series of projects since 2015. And it's a pleasure to be co-hosting this event with Dr. Harkunti and her team at ITB. So over to you, Dr. Harkunti.
Okay, thank you very much, Professor Richard Haigh. I would like to share my screen. Please allow me. Oops, I need to get permission from the committee, from the organizing. Oops. Okay, yeah. Yeah, thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening for all the participants as well as distinguished guests. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. May peace amount upon us. It is my honor to welcome you to the workshop on scientific writing and publishing, which is especially for Indonesian researchers working in disaster risk and related subjects. On this occasion, I would like to thank to the Director General of Higher Education, Ministry of Education and Culture, which will be represented by Dr. Muhammad Sofan Effendi. And then I would like to also sincerely appreciate my dear friend, Professor Richard Haigh and Professor Dilanthi Amaratunga from University of Huddersfield for your support and collaboration in conducting this workshop. I'm Harkunti Rahayu from Institute Technology Bandung. It is a long journey research collaboration between Institute Technology Bandung and University of Huddersfield, represented by me and Professor Richard and Professor Dilanthi. Knowing that Indonesia is located in the Pacific Ring of Fire, an area with high degree of tectonic activity, we must cope with the constant risk of volcanic eruption, earthquake, floods, tsunami, and many others. This actually has challenged us to become a trigger for research collaboration and partnership between Indonesia and UK. So I would like to highlight here, Professor Richard Dilanthi and Professor and myself actually have been collaborating since 2015 with our first event was organizing a workshop similar to this workshop back 2015, exactly that we conduct in ITB. Since then, we have been collaborated in several research initiatives regarding disaster risk reduction and climate change adaptation with funding from Newton Fund and others EU scheme. Such as 2017-2018, we have implemented mainstreaming integrated disaster risk reduction and climate change adaptation strategy into coastal urban agglomeration under the program of foreign cooperation under Kemenristek-Dikti and Newton Institutional Link. And from this initiative, we won Newton Prize in 2019 that recognized pioneering research and innovation that come from international partnership, with each project helping to solve global development challenges. The appreciation of Newton Prize is implemented by conducting research title, developing and harmonizing local capacity for tsunami early warning, with the funding come from Department for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy of UK. Within this research scope, actually one of the components that we would like to organize this workshop aiming to build researcher capacity to address disaster risk, including improving disaster risk reduction and early warning at local level as described and presented by our friends Richard Haigh. And then other than that, we have also implemented other research collaboration with different funding scheme from Newton Fund and from EU-UK institution, such as mitigating hydrometeorology hazard impact through transboundary river management in the Ciliwung River Basin, a program funding from the Natural Environment Research Council from UK, and also Kemenristek-Dikti 2019 until 2021. Also, we have Cabaret, capacity building in Asia for resilient education in 2017 until 2020, and integrating pandemic preparedness and disaster risk reduction to protect economic access and people in the new normal for the Greater Bandung. And as well, we have several other activity which is related with this collaboration. So for example, for this thing, that our partnership initially started, like I mentioned before, organizing similar workshop in 2015. This workshop actually has been conducted in ITB, and also this has been increased a lot of interest among the young researcher, young academic, as well young faculty from UK as well as from Indonesian university. This is very nice, showing about collaborative partnership, not only between University of Huddersfield and ITB, but also among other university in both country, Indonesia and UK. And then on this occasion also, that ITB and University of Huddersfield has also conducted research on the mainstreaming integrated disaster risk reduction and climate change adaptation strategy into coastal urban agglomeration that I mentioned before. And aiming of this research is to develop integrated disaster risk reduction and climate change adaptation strategy to protect centers of economic growth and development outcome in coastal urban agglomeration with the case study location in Jakarta of Bali. Because of this work, actually, we also got the appreciation on the Newton Prize for 2019, which is awarded in 2020, is especially that we would like here to implement the developing local capacity through for tsunami early warning system. This is very interesting collaboration because the appreciation actually also is not only for us, but also is a great thing that we can also include also capacity building for other researchers as well as other academic and young faculty for Indonesia. And other than that, we have also a good scheme here under collaboration, ITB and University of Huddersfield, especially Professor Richard Dilanthi, Professor and myself. Actually, this is on the collaboration with the Newton scheme, is in the title Integrating of Pandemic Preparedness and Disaster Risk Reduction. And as well as we have also the works on the mitigating hydrometeorological hazard impact through transboundary river management on the Ciliwung River, which is ongoing program. And especially for this under Newton Fund Scheme Impact, this is still ongoing at the beginning of the second semester that we're gonna implement it, integrating pandemic preparedness and disaster risk reduction. So this is the first time actually for myself personally that we conduct this collaborative partnership research to my hometown, which is Bandung, and as well as the Greater Bandung Metropolitan. Aim of this work actually to map the key actors involved in COVID-19 and pandemic preparedness and develop multi-stakeholders transition pathway for vertical and horizontal integration, as well as increase the capacity of provincial and local actors in the Greater Bandung Metropolitan area to address the threat of economic asset and as well as people posed to disaster risk reduction. And for our collaboration, actually not only at the local and regional level as among university, but our collaboration here, we also have a strong partnership and we have on the regional role. For example, this is one of the regional roles that we conduct here that Professor Richard and Professor Dilanthi is supporting the working group 1, which I chair, of the Tsunami Risk Community Awareness and Preparedness, which is part of the UNESCO IOC ICG Indian Ocean Tsunami Warning and Mitigation System. So actually this is a collaborative among 24 member states or country from 28 Indian Ocean country, where this focus of working group 1, actually we conduct a lot of things. So some of the product that under the collaboration between the three of us, we have completed several works that contributed to strengthen not only for our country, Indonesia or Sri Lanka or other country in Indian Ocean, but we also expand our collaboration with 24 countries. For example, the first one, we prepare and develop as well conduct a survey on the capacity assessment of tsunami preparedness for Indian Ocean for 24 and 20 from 28 countries. And then this survey actually benefit all the country as part of their national report, where we have this every 2 years ICG meeting among the all Indian Ocean country. And then the second product that the three of us has collaborate here is conduct interface project in 4 countries like Indonesia, Sri Lanka, as well as Maldives and Myanmar. And product of this is a briefing papers, which is very beneficial to other 24 country of Indian Ocean members, because it's very important how they strengthen the interface institute in tsunami early warning system, not only strengthening the downstream or upstream, but strengthening the interface is become very important. And then the third one, we contribute also here, providing special edition for working group 1, part of the IGDRBE journal. And then we mainstream disaster risk reduction into urban planning and resilience, still ongoing program. And then integrating pandemic, tsunami, and other multi-hazard preparedness into early warning and urban planning. And the last one here is we will conduct a massive survey among 24 countries here to understand the current status and best practice of COVID or biological hazard preparedness as part of tsunami and multi-hazard early warning in coastal area of Indian Ocean region 24 country. So because of this, I would like to show also the role of researcher is not only at the university. The role of researcher is not only producing the paper, but we can also produce like emphasizing or strengthening the regulation, the law, the policy, and as well not in the country, but we can contribute into region, for example, what we have done for the Indian Ocean country. So at the end, I would like to emphasize here that Indonesian researcher is, I give you example before, is important to play significant role in the area of disaster of reduction, whether in national, regional, and international level by conducting, promoting fundamental and applied research of disaster management and mitigation, as well as other relevant mitigation initiative, as we understand that a lot of people that our country is the sources of all the trigger of all hazard. This is happen in Indonesia. And the second point here that I would like to highlight, ITB and University of Huddersfield are pleased to facilitate Indonesia young or experienced researcher or academic to develop skill and knowledge related to scientific writing and publishing through workshop as part of our partnership. Last but not least, I would like to hope and hope that all participants will have a fruitful meeting and discussion and also produce interesting results as well as engaging actively during the workshop. Thank you very much. I return to you, Richard.
Thank you, Dr. Harkunti. And I also am very appreciative of the collaboration over many years, and it's great that we're able to bring together a lot of other researchers from across Indonesia as well to join in this collaboration for this workshop. And
yeah, okay. Sorry, carry on. Yeah.
Okay, thanks, Harkunti. So I'd now like to also introduce Professor Bambang Istijono, who's from Andalas University in Indonesia. And again, Professor Bambang has been a collaborator with us over several years, particularly on some major EU projects like Cabaret, and also on a recent institutional links project. So Professor Bambang, I'd like you to make some welcoming remarks.
Pak Bambang still mute.
Thank you, Professor Richard. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good afternoon and good morning for our colleagues in the UK. I also would like to thank the organizer, for giving me an opportunity to give this following welcome remark. Dear Honorable Professor Dilanthi, Professor Richard, Ibu Dr. Harkunti, all speakers and facilitators, and most importantly, to all participants of the virtual workshop in scientific writing and publishing. It is our great pleasure to welcome everyone in this workshop. First and foremost, we wish everybody is staying healthy and doing well during this difficult time. This workshop is indeed very important for Indonesian researchers who conducting disaster research. As researchers, we need to disseminate the result of our research, especially in reputable journal as International Journal of Disaster Resilience in Built Environment, which edited by Professor Dilanthi and Professor Richard. In doing so, of course, we need to develop of writing skills and understand the process as well. I believe by the end of this workshop, all of us can achieve this. I hope this workshop will be great success and have a nice workshop. Thank you very much. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Bambang. Okay, so I think now it's time to move on to the first day's proceedings of the workshop. So I'm delighted to introduce my good colleague who I've been working with for over 20 years and been very much involved with the work in Indonesia as well. Professor Dilanthi Amaratunga, who's co-director of the Global Disaster Resilience Centre here at the University of Huddersfield in the UK. So Dilanthi is going to take you through the first day's proceedings and also introduce our distinguished keynote speaker for this morning. Thank you.
Good morning and good afternoon, everybody. Just want to check, can you see my screen? Okay, so thank you very much, everybody, for coming on board this morning. I just want to sort of take you through the program for the first day. And as you can see on the screen, the program is like this. And of course, the initial welcome addresses and remarks have already been done. And then soon after this introduction, we will go to the very important keynote speech. And then after that, I will be doing a session on introduction to the academic publishing. And after that, of course, we all need little breaks when we do online sessions. So there's a short break from 15:45 to 16, that is Indonesia time. And then after that, there's a very important breakout groups on structuring a manuscript. So that's a very much hands-on exercise. people will be divided into different groups, and then the team will come back, and then there will be kind of a group feedback to the plenary. And following on from that, I will actually do the wrapping up of the first day with the closing remarks. So this is actually how we are going to run the workshop during the first day. And of course, similar introduction will be carried out for tomorrow as well. So with this, I would like to sort of, introduce our keynote speaker of our important session. So thank you very much once again. Today we have a great keynote speaker for you, and it is my absolute honor to introduce her, Professor Suzanne Wilkinson. Professor Suzanne Wilkinson is the Professor of Construction Management and Associate Dean of Research at College of Sciences at Massey University in Auckland, New Zealand. I got to know Suzanne about 17 years ago, if I can recall correctly, and I have been following her along with her professional words of wisdom ever since. It is my pleasure to get to know you, Suzanne. She's interested in how cities, communities, and organizations, including construction organizations, plan for disasters and manage hazard events, and how to make them more resilient. Her research focuses on disaster management, construction innovation, resilience, and smart cities. She is considered one of the world experts in disaster management, disaster recovery, and post-disaster reconstruction. Suzanne has written and co-authored over 300 publications, many in top international journals. I can't think of a better keynote speaker to address you. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me welcoming Professor Suzanne Wilkinson. Over to you, Suzanne.
Well, hello everybody. Thank you very much, Dilanthi, for that lovely introduction. I'm going to be talking to you today about scientific writing and publishing. I just want to share my screen, so I'll do that now. Here we go. Everybody see the screen? Is that the title? Everyone okay with that? Yep. So I'm going to be talking about scientific writing and publishing. I'm just going to take you on a little journey, really, and this journey is really through a. Let's just have a look. I don't know what's happened here. Sorry, excuse me. Okay, so this journey is through a paper, and this is one of the papers that I've written over the years with a PhD student, a very good colleague now, April Errol, and he was one of my PhD students from Nepal. I've had only over 35 graduated PhD students now in my long career as an academic, and I've currently supervising about 10 and co-supervising another 10, so kind of roughly that number. And April was one of my PhD students that came over on a scholarship from Nepal, and was very interested in disaster risk reduction because obviously they'd had a major earthquake, and he had been involved as a researcher and as a policy person in Nepal trying to help recovery, and felt that in order to do better, a PhD would be a good thing for him to do. You'll notice this is in the International Journal of Disaster Resilience in the Built Environment. So Dilanthi and Richard's very well regarded journal. We publish quite a number of papers in here, and it's one of our top journals that we target. So I'll take you on a journey through this paper and talk through the kinds of things that as an academic we look for, as kind of a senior academic we look to produce as we write papers. So I'm going to first of all talk about 6 key stages and their pitfalls, and these are key stages that I see as we go through journals, as we write papers. So the key stages, the first key stage that we really need to think about is the introduction. What I see as a reviewer and an author, and mostly now an editor of papers and kind of like managing teams of PhD students, is this sense that you have to put everything into a journal paper. There's kind of too many themes and too many ideas, and it's way too complicated. And so when you think about trying to write a paper, you've got to think about how your audience is going to perceive the information that you're writing about. How easy is it for them to read? What's the kind of readability of that? And because if you're new to research, you've probably done some fabulous pieces of work. You're quite keen on putting everything in, absolutely because you don't want to lose any idea or any thought. So I think that within the introduction sets the scene for the paper. It gives you that background. And so one of the big pitfalls, I think, is trying to just fit too many ideas and too many themes into your paper. So the way around this, I think, is really just to kind of write 1 or 2 sentences. What's your paper about? And just give your introduction to a colleague to read. So what is this paper about? And I think the paper that we wrote for this journal kind of demonstrates the kinds of things that you might want to put together in really kind of small sentences. So here is the journal paper introduction. Gets to the heart of this paper. It says, this research is focused on the study of 3 cultural heritage sites in the Kathmandu Valley. It's a comparative study based on the role of social capital in the recovery process of cultural heritage sites. And it argues for the importance of community involvement and community support during recovery. If you think about that, really what it's trying to do is set up, what are we going to tell you in this paper? What are you going to find out about? You're basically going to find out about the value or the role of social capital and how it helps us to recover during a disaster. So the introduction is really important that you give that message, a clear message to the reader. In terms of the next stage of your paper, setting the scene, and I'm sure you'll be working through some of these aspects during the workshop, setting the scene and really your literature review. The biggest thing I see as a reviewer and an author is really this too little or too much literature, or no definitions or too many. So I've seen papers that are just, the literature review tends to be full of definitions with little connection and little commentary on the definitions. Or I've seen literature reviews that are, sometimes almost 2/3 of a paper, and then you've got very little space to write about or to give your results and your discussion. So I think one of the key things that we look for is that balance between what the literature is really trying to say about your subject. And the way I tend to encourage my colleagues and my peers and my PhD students is to think about the title. If you've got a title like this one, which says the role of social capital in the recovery of cultural built heritage, in your introduction, in your literature review, you really expect to see those words. So you would expect to see something around what is social capital, what is it, what is it about, what does it do, what's the background of social capital. You really want to understand cultural heritage. What does that mean, both in an international context, but also in a national context? What is cultural heritage? And then similarly with recovery, the word recovery, we want to know some ideas or some theories of recovery, but also we want to make it specific to how it fits with our theme of the paper, which in this case, it's about heritage sites in Nepal. So I think when you look at your literature review, reflect back on your title, reflect back on your introduction, and they will give you a kind of steer into how much or how little you need to put for each of the major kind of keywords that you're thinking about in this paper. Methods, the poorly explained methodology is really common in scientific writing. And so my approach to this is always to say to the students, look, the simplest way is to do the who, what, where, when, why, and how. And you're pretty much going to cover it if you just use those in your methods section. So if you're missing out things, you know, you quite often, a reviewer of your paper will quite often see what you're missing out. They'll say, okay, we didn't understand what techniques you were using. We don't know how many participants are in your survey. We don't know how you've analysed your survey. So this kind of simple approach is really to help you think about how to structure your method section. So for instance, in this paper, we had 300 participants. What was a focus on public involvement and participation in rebuilding. So you'll see our method section goes through that, talks about that. Where was it? It was 3 cultural heritage sites in Kathmandu. We showed a picture of where the sites were in relation to Nepal itself. When we talked about when we did the research, various times of the days for 10 days, starting from 9 o'clock till 5 o'clock in the afternoon daily. We talked a bit more about why that was important, and why did we want to do this? Well, we wanted to understand the role of social capital in the recovery process of the 3 cultural heritage sites. So you'll see when we look at the why, we're linking that directly back to the literature review and directly back to the introduction. And we're kind of bringing that in and saying this is what we're trying to do. And the how, within this section, well, within this paper, data collection was based on a snowball sampling. And had I been reviewing this paper, I would have picked up that we usually talk about data, how the data's analysed, the tools and techniques that we use to analyse in the methods section under the how. And in this paper that actually wasn't covered. So I'm not quite sure why, but that wasn't covered in this paper. But usually we would have the whole how, we go through the whole process that we used. If you think about the next section, your results section, your results are really explaining data, explaining the information that you've gathered, putting some kind of shedding some light on the data, linking it back to what your thoughts are in terms of the literature and the themes of the paper. So what we tend to see is poorly explained data in papers, or too much data, and again just trying to put in absolutely every idea into the paper that's somehow connected. You remember in this paper, we're really looking at social capital, we're looking at cultural, we're looking at heritage, and we're looking at recovery. So we're looking at heritage buildings, recovery and social capital as the main themes for this paper. But if we, when we look at results sections, quite often you'll see results that don't actually align at all with any of the parts of the paper. They're just kind of almost randomized or poorly laid out, or not kind of collected together to highlight the themes. And so really what you need to be thinking about is what visuals can you use? So clear diagrams that represent the information, kind of visual approach. And the other technique that we tend to use is to really use the quotes to illustrate key points. So for instance, here you'll see that there's a kind of visual which shows the numbers of people and where they were, who they were in different parts in the 3 different sites. And then this quote, I think, is quite a good kind of summary of what we were trying to think, what we were trying to look at when we were looking at social capital and the participation of the community in the reconstruction. and it's talking about how active this community was, very active in reconstruction. They tried to participate in any way they could, and they served in different ways, development committees, reconstruction workers, or some of them collected funds. They didn't wait for government assistance, and they were very proud of their reconstruction of their heritage building. And if you look through the paper, you'll see there's a contrast between these three different heritage sites in terms of how much social capital was used in the reconstruction and the impact that that had on both the reconstruction itself, the reconstruction process of these heritage buildings, but also on the pride that the community felt in the reconstruction process. And so as you see, like the results are shedding light for us on social capital, heritage buildings, and the way in which the community kind of came together to recover buildings. So we're keeping those themes throughout this paper. The next stage, the fifth stage, is always a discussion stage of the paper. And well, the way I tend to think about discussion is it's linking the review of what you've done in your introduction and your literature review with your results to give you a new or clearer perspective. So we talk about how we extend knowledge, how we can contribute to knowledge, a body of knowledge. And I think a really good discussion will allow you to kind of play around with those ideas, those major themes, to come up with something new that you think would be useful. And it can be useful in lots of different ways. For instance, it could be useful for policy development. This paper in particular was one that we were quite pleased with because it basically showed how policy and community, how the lack of intervention from government and from officials is not necessarily an impediment to community recovery if you have strong social capital within your community. So I think this was, and so that can help with recovery, with developing recovery policies and recovery planning. So here you'll see a discussion which links the first piece of work, who are researchers about community participation, creates difficulty in recovery plan implementation. And the failure of community inclusion impedes recovery. So some people had argued that already. And so what this paper was showing was in Nepal, the strong social capital meant that the community involvement could be quite high. But if there was low social capital, community involvement was disconnected from recovery, and therefore recovery was much slower. And so I think, what we're taking here is arguments from previous literature and previous research around community participation, and we're adding a different lens on it around heritage buildings and the experience of Nepal to come up to, and we're looking at three different ways of recovering using social capital. Our conclusion is about these key stages. I think looking through this paper and thinking about how we structured it and thought about it, I think the last thing is really your key message. You're coming back. Most reviewers, they will focus on your introduction and your conclusion, and they need to be in sync with each other. They need to have developed some of the ideas, but they need to kind of refer back to what the paper was about. And so this paper here, this key message here, this is what our conclusion was, that cultural heritage is part of daily activities for community members, and that the restoration of the heritage sites without active community involvement can produce a loss of historical value. That came through in the results and the discussion, and that community involvement is critical to reconstruction and maintenance of cultural heritage. So we're again linking the social capital, linking the heritage buildings, and we're linking the recovery, our three major themes, all in this in the end of this paper. So those are the 6 kind of key stages and the pitfalls that I've seen as a researcher. The next thing I'm just going to quickly touch on, because I think this will set the scene for the rest of the workshop, is the kind of things about how to publish and things that I've seen, and things that I think about and things I talk about with my colleagues and my students. So I've got kind of 5 key points, and I assume these will come up over the workshop, and during the workshop you'll have an opportunity to discuss and to think about how you might manage these. So I think the first thing is obviously relevant and reputable journal. So is it in your field and is it reputable? So how do you know whether it's in your field? Well, you know, title. So here we have some emerald journals. Disaster risk reduction, I'm not sure is an emerald, but certainly the other 2 ones. We know that emerald are a reputable publisher. They have relevant journals in the field of disaster management and resilience. And then read the journal objectives. Here we have the International Journal of Disaster Resilience, what its aims are: knowledge and capacity in strategic and practical aspects of disaster risk reduction, response and reconstruction. So you see the paper that we worked on fits very nicely into the journal objectives, the aims and objectives of the journal. And it's about reducing the impacts of natural hazards, and which is the earthquake in Kathmandu in Nepal. That was obviously part of the, fitted right into the journal. And not only that, we were talking about the built environment. So we were talking about the heritage sites around Kathmandu. So, you know, we were talking specifically about rebuilding heritage sites. So that paper was straight into that journal. It was the best journal for our paper. So you look at the journal objectives, you look at what it's publishing, you look at their main themes. So, you know, those kinds of things you get by reading widely, reading those journals, looking at what they're covering, what are the main themes that they're working on at the moment, what are the things that they tend to publish in. And you check the quality, you know, what is the quality of that journal? Again, coming back to, is it a reputable journal with a reputable publisher? Does it have good kind of a good reputation amongst researchers in your field? So that would be my first piece of advice if you're thinking about publishing. Second piece of advice is really around consider how long the journal takes to review and publish. So some journals can take 1.5 to 2 years. If you've got information or research that you think is not going to is not going to be current in 2 years' time, or themes or work that you need to get out quite quickly, you need to kind of put them in to journals where you want to get a quicker turnaround. But you still need to think about the reputation of the journal, and is it, you know, is it a kind of reputable journal? But I think it's one of the frustrations for academics and for PhD students, and PhD students in particular, when they're trying to publish their work, is, you know, they put a paper and then they can wait a year, and then they get very frustrated, and by that time they're trying to finish up their PhD, and they're wondering, are they ever going to get published? Are they ever going to see their work published? And so I think, you know, most academics know which journals are faster turnaround than others, and it can sometimes be a trade-off between waiting a long time to get into a journal as opposed to going for a faster turnaround. My next key point will be, you know, the paper needs to be well written. It's very easy as a reviewer to turn a paper away and turn it down because it's full of typos and grammatical errors. So, you know, it basically points to a lot of other problems that you're going to see in the paper when you see this happen. And I've been given reviews of papers that even in the abstract there has been many errors. grammatical typos, logical errors, and as soon as you see that, you know you're not really going to, it's not going to get a good review. So you have to do your due diligence on your paper, spend time really thinking about the writing style, and making sure that there are no basic errors. So the best thing to do is just ask a colleague that you have, or ask somebody that you know that publishes well. Ask them to proofread and ask for critical feedback. And don't be upset about the critical feedback, because you will learn from that feedback. So my PhD students will probably go through 4 or 5 iterations before I will let a paper have my name on it. I will just and my other colleagues will be the same. They will just go through iteration after iteration to make sure that the paper is well written and crisp and nice. Next key point is, when you get rejected, don't get disheartened. We all get rejected a lot, and it's just something you have to learn to deal with. So I have seen young researchers be absolutely crumple because they have been rejected by a journal. There's a lot of reasons why journals reject papers. They may have had a lot of papers on that theme. It may not fit the journal as well as you thought it might fit. The reviewer, you might have hit a really harsh reviewer who just didn't get your paper or was not interested in your paper, and you don't know which one it is or what the reasons are, except for the reviews that you get. So consider those reviews as helping you to make your paper, make your work better. And then revise your paper and send it elsewhere. I've had numbers of students who have just not been able to kind of think about the revision of a paper and sending it elsewhere. There are many journals and journals that will suit your paper. A well-written, well-researched paper will get published in a good journal. You just got to look at the reviews. What am I missing? Have I not explained the method well enough? Do my results not make sense? Is there too little discussion? Is the balance between parts of the paper wrong? Am I putting too much in this paper? Is it really 2 papers rather than 1? But don't get disheartened when you get reviews, bad reviews, because we all get them, and we revise and send elsewhere. And we just, put it down to experience. But I think one of the key things I learned, and I learned this quite early on, is it's great to get involved as a reviewer. So this is one of the best ways to learn what's an acceptable paper, what's a good structure, what papers look like, is to actually critically review papers for a journal, because that really gives you a full insight into what makes a good review, but also what's acceptable within the journal. So I think that's probably where I will finish. So hopefully that gives you a view of the publishing and writing, and I'd be really happy to take any questions. Okay, I see there's something come up on the chat. So, that just says, please share all your questions in the chat box. Does anyone have any questions?
Yes, Suzanne, I can actually. I'll pick up one question, so if you can answer this. It says, how would you advise as an approach on which order to plan and write the sections in the paper?
I'm sorry, which order to write the sections?
Yeah, which order to plan and write the sections in the paper? Okay,
so it's kind of an interesting question, because some people will write will get their results and write the paper around their results. So they'll kind of go, well, how does this connect to previous things? I personally like coming from the top end, getting the structure of a paper and the ideas of the paper done first and moving through the paper, so that getting a good abstract and getting a good structure and knowing the balance within the paper. So I guess personally, if I'm writing, I tend to go kind of methodically through the paper. With the literature review, it's what I tend to do is stick to the key themes. So I'm quite methodical in that way as well. So sticking to the key things. So my order would usually be writing the abstract with a view to what my results are about, and then writing the literature review and with a view to how that connects to my results, and then I do the discussion last. So I usually kind of move my way through papers, but I've seen people do it all different ways. They've written the conclusion first, and then they've tried to backfill the paper in the conclusions, and sometimes that can work, but sometimes that can create a bit of a mess, because sometimes your preconceived ideas are in your conclusion, and you have to then rethink your paper. I've seen people start at the results section, so that I suppose one of the difficulties of starting at the results section is people just want to put too much in, and then therefore there's nothing around the paper because the whole paper's just full of results. But personally, I go through, I'm quite methodical and go through. I start with a good structure and then kind of fill in from the front.
Okay, so maybe perhaps I suppose we can just take maybe one more question. So I suppose there's a question, Suzanne, on how do you identify who is the contributing author, especially for large multiple partner projects?
Yeah, I think this one comes up quite a lot, and I think one of the things to do is to have an honest discussion at the beginning of projects around how you are going to approach authorship of papers, and who's going to be doing those papers, and then that then avoids a lot of the subsequent problems of how does authorship work. So one of the other issues I think is around getting so I'm currently working on a really large 5-year program of work, and we've got 35 researchers involved in it. And we've got, within that, we've got a whole team of PhD students, we've got postdocs. They're all doing discrete pieces of work within the whole program. And those discrete pieces of work, they're quite rightly, the PhD postdoc should be the main lead author on those pieces of work. But when those pieces of work come together in produce parts, then quite often what happens is the oversight of those papers, or the ideas of those connections, have now moved out of the kind of realms of the PhD students and moved into the kind of program leadership team. And so the discussion is, well, how many people should be on a paper, and how do you structure this paper? And then who should be the lead author? And so we look at things like, where did the results come from? Who's done the majority of the work? Who's done the majority of the editing? Where are the ideas from, which quite often are different from who's actually done the work? How do those ideas connect to other pieces of work that are going on? So your question's really complex. And I think, going back to what I said right at the beginning, having an honest discussion about this has to happen on multi-partner projects. Otherwise, what you have is people just publishing all over the place, and they may be publishing bits of your work, and you get upset, and it all kind of gets a little bit scrambled.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Suzanne, for that excellent keynote speech, and also sort of I really think by looking at the program, and of course, some of the points that I'm going to cover, you said this really well. I'm sure there will be more questions coming through, so I don't think that we can I think we got the best keynote speaker in you, with all the experiences in academia, publishing, and so on and so forth. So thank you very much for sharing your experiences with upcoming, and of course, there are a lot of senior researchers listening also. So thank you very much, Suzanne, for your intervention. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I must say, I really appreciate being asked to speak, and I actually welcome comments and questions. So if you do have things, please get in contact with me. I'm sure my information is on some of the material that you're receiving. And Dilanthi, lovely to see you again. I hope to meet post-COVID. Bye. Thank you very much.
Okay, so we are sort of about 20 minutes behind time, so I'm hoping that we will be able to catch up. So next is actually my talk about why publish, selecting a journal or publication type and article, taking it further from where Suzanne stopped. So I need to share my screen. Can the host give me the permission, please? Okay, can all of you see my screen, and can all of you hear? Can someone please give me an indication? Right, okay, thank you very much. Okay, so just to sort of, in setting the scene, I'm Dilanthi Amaratunga, Professor of Disaster Risk Reduction at the University of Huddersfield. Of course, Dr. Harkunti explained and took you through some of the sort of projects that we are doing, and that we actually collaborate very closely with Indonesian researchers and various partners. And in that process, Dr. Harkunti is our main point of contact, and of course, our dear friend and collaborator. So thank you very much, Harkunti, for facilitating these processes. So in terms of sort of just to set the scene in terms of, why I think that I can actually speak about this topic. For example, I have done 500 plus peer-reviewed papers, and Google Scholar certified. I'm nearly there with 10,000 citations, and with H-index 31, and so on and so forth. And of course, I have been part of teams where we have been actually offered a recipient of best paper awards at various instances. And also, as already highlighted, I'm the joint editor of International Journal of Disaster Resilience in the Built Environment with my colleague, Professor Richard Haigh. So this is actually its 11th year, the 11th volume. And of course, you all are very welcome to submit articles. And of course, there will be a special presentation tomorrow about journal publications by the publisher. And of course, in terms of editorials and edits, I have actually been part of editorial teams of so many peer-reviewed conference proceedings and so on and so forth. So you can actually see some of them here. So, and some of the number of papers actually were ranging from 40 in some proceedings and to about 675 in certain others. And of course, I have been an author of a very large number of briefing papers, reports, guidebooks, and so on and so forth. So in terms of setting the scene for this session, we all are likely to get very excited at the prospect of seeing our name on the cover of a beautiful glossy book, perhaps our own listing in Amazon, for example, or maybe to even to have our own space on one of the shelves in a bookstore. So I think this is actually what we all are dreaming of. Or perhaps we should not be quite so ambitious at the start of our publishing careers. Perhaps we should learn to walk before we embark on the marathon involved in producing a complete book. I think that is where we all are coming from. Perhaps in that sense, we should begin by submitting an academic paper for publication in a journal serving our specific discipline. So that can be a starting point. So this is actually how I want to set the. Give me a second. It's just stuck. I don't know why. Okay, so I thought better to sort of, it is good to highlight before we get into the rest of the talk, it is good to highlight some of the common mistakes. So I think in that sense, Professor Suzanne Wilkinson in her keynote set the scene really well. She took you through some of the key mistakes that a lot of you do in terms of mistakes. But again, you know, this is a kind of a snapshot. I'm not going to go.
Doctor, Professor, we can't see your screen full. I think we can't see the screens moving in. Just if you could stop your screen share and start again. Yes, that's better. Yeah, that's better.
Okay, thank you very much for that intervention. Okay, so I just want to highlight some of the common mistakes that we all do, including myself, in our manuscripts. So in that sense, Suzanne actually set the scene really well, and she identified 5 common mistakes that a lot of people do, and took you through by taking a paper as an example. But I just want to highlight some of the common mistakes here, but it is not my intention to go through them in detail because of time limitations. But you know, as you can sort of say, the paper is written in poor English. Suzanne highlighted that very well, and also sort of the methods, the interventions, and instruments are not very clearly done. So of course, you know, we can actually go through a lot of issues as mistakes, and again, sort of, you know, poor critical analysis and also plagiarism. So I will actually cover that in bit of detail later, and also use of all references and self-citation. So of course, beyond limits. So these are some of the common mistakes that a lot of people we do by knowingly or unknowingly. So with that in mind, I want to take you through my presentation under these topics. For example, publication types that we can deal with and we are dealing with, and why should we write research papers? You know, of course, you know, everything that we do should have a reason, and also the philosophy of writing research papers, and also some of the basics of structuring a research paper, adding to what Suzanne has just started describing to you during her keynote, and also to conclude my talk with some useful tips. Types of writing we generally do. So this actually, I took this list from the UKRI website, and then you can sort of see we are doing so many types of publications, and different publications need addressing in very different ways. So, but I just want to give you a kind of a snapshot of types of publications that we have to deal with. But today we are actually focusing on writing academic papers. So purpose of scientific writing. So non-evidence-based products doesn't go anywhere within the scientific community. I think you agree with me if I say that, because always it is really good to sort of get peer review publications into the system, because this is where that we need to be very careful these days, because of course with the World Wide Web, you know, anybody can publish anything and upload, and it will be available in various websites. But we need to be very mindful in making reference to those, and that is why it is really important to make sure that we look out for and we make reference for the publications which has gone through the right process. So in that sense, I think writing is very much important part of science, and of course sort of and also sort of where one cannot speak, thereof one must be silent. silent. I think I really like that quotation relating to publications. So then why should you write journal papers? So of course, there need to be reasons. So of course, some people write for personal pleasure. But I suppose, I think we shouldn't be hiding the second fact that I want to say. One of the first and most obvious advantages of publishing a paper is it will add additional line in providing in your CV, a very important line indeed. So I suppose, most of us who are part of this workshop, I think will agree with me on that. For example, prospective academic employers planning to hire a newly graduated academic will cast a critical eye over the applicant's list of current and pending publications. That is the fact, and that is the truth. And also sort of another reason for publishing is to build your academic reputation. Of course, you built up your academic reputation. Of course, there are so many factors involved in that, but your academic publication list actually plays a major role in that. And also it will help you to sort of actually build up sort of your long-term ambitions, and also to gain credibility as a scientist. But of course, maybe that you do not want to write papers, but you're doing it because your employer tells you to do it. So I suppose these are some of the reasons why we are actually writing papers. So again, with that, what are the benefits of publishing papers? So I suppose, you can improve your writing skills. It will help to upgrade your knowledge and to keep you updated. And of course, it makes you happy. As I sort of said, when you sort of see a paper appearing online or as part of a journal, you really feel, you get that sort of really sort of happy feeling. And also sort of it helps you to sort of appreciate your work by yourself and by others, and also sort of it adds value to the current knowledge base, and also it will keep you alive as a researcher, and most importantly it will motivate others to do research. And I suppose that is the main purpose of our keynote speech this morning. I'm sure most of you have already thought, okay, it is high time that I should do my first paper, for example. Yeah. So being published means that your paper is permanent, because it will be available, somewhere out there as part of the body of knowledge, and your paper is improved because it goes through various cycles of peer reviews, editing, and so on and so forth. And your paper is actively promoted if you use the right publication source. Your paper is actually promoted, and your writing is trustworthy, and this is really important. As I sort of said, you will see all sorts of publishing available these days via the web, but you really need to be mindful about what to believe and what not to believe. But when you do your publication through a reliable source, we can actually take it as trustworthy. So that is actually really important to consider in my view. So a general philosophy of writing. A paper is an attempt to persuade, and it is but the key to that persuasion is organization. Again, Professor Wilkinson highlighted that, in terms of how organization is important. So in that sense, it is fair to say that there's no need to use 1,000 words where only 500 words will do. So that is a very important point. So what journal should you submit to? Again, I'm delighted that Suzanne started this conversation, and I want to add a little bit more to that. So in my view, choosing a journal to publish is an investment decision. If you do the right decision, that will definitely help you. And in the same way, if you do the wrong decision, that will damage your reputation, and not only your reputation, your institution's reputation as well. So some of the quality indicators to look out to. For example, these days, I know particularly in Indonesia, you all are encouraged to publish in Scopus journals. So because that identifies as a good quality indicator. But citations are also good, but it is not complete but not complete guide to quality. Some people highlight the rejection rate just to emphasize how good or how important your journal is, but it can be misleading sometimes. And also you can actually consider certain other factors also, such as relevant readership, dissemination mechanisms, time that is taken to submit and publish. Again, Suzanne emphasized that point very clearly. And also sort of in one way or the other, we need to be a bit more political as well. For example, national journal versus international journals. And we need to be strategic. For example, which one is actually better, to get 5 articles in low-ranked journals or just one really good article in a high-ranked journal? So these are some of the decisions that you need to be making. That is why I said choosing a journal to publish is an investment decision. And one way of doing that is, I think, co-authorship is as a possibility. For example, you can always write with colleagues across departments, across different institutions, and sometimes across universities and countries. For example, I can, with Dr. Harkunti, we have done so many publications that is actually across universities, across national boundaries and international publications, and they have actually attracted a lot of citations and downloads. So in my view, co-authorship is a very good possibility. So you can actually sort of see some papers we have done across the world. For example, this particular paper that you can see to your left is a joint publication between UK, Thailand, and Sri Lanka. So of course, doing publications like that is really helpful and useful. Yeah. And getting back to sort of writing style. Again, Suzanne started this discussion through her keynote, and I want to sort of re-emphasize them again. For example, use short and simple phrases. One of the mistakes that a lot of us do, whose first language is not English, is that we try to complicate sentences. We think that we should write very complicated language, which is actually not true. So use short and simple phrases, and in doing so you need to make sure that your writing is very clear and not open to interpretation. This is very important. So, and also do not worry about constant repetition of the same word. Again, I have seen in manuscripts, some writers trying to replace different words to give the same meaning. There's absolutely no need. If you want to use it, just keep on using the same word, because substituting other words can lead to confusion, because there is no need to refer to a thesaurus when you write your paper. So just stick with the words that you are familiar with, which are directly linked to the subject that you are covering. So getting back to sort of structuring a research paper in very brief terms, again, you will go through a practical exercise later on in the day with this, but in terms of sort of giving you a kind of initial idea. Full paper, again, I'm not saying that this is the absolute structure that you should use, but this is an example. For example, a paper can have an abstract and then the introduction, background information, literature review, followed by the methodology, results, discussion, conclusion, and the references. So I will very briefly take you through these areas, but again, during the practical exercise later on in the day, you will get to know more about these sections. Again, Suzanne actually sort of introduced this area very well. The introduction of the paper, it actually sets the scene and put the research in context. So, and also, for example, it will help the reader to know why the study was done and how it broadly relates to other research. So it actually sort of set the scene, and author generally uses the introduction to describe the research question or the aims of the study. So basically, introduction is actually it actually sets the scene on what your paper is all about. Then the literature review. Again, Suzanne highlighted about some of the pitfalls related to literature review. you know what, some writers, they cover about 75% of the paper with literature, and some writers include only about 10%. So both are incorrect. So you really need to achieve that balance. So what are the questions that the review of the literature can answer? Again, this is a snapshot. You know, the literature actually will give you answers on what are the key sources, yeah, and what are the major issues and debates about the topic, and what are the sort of the political standpoints as far as certain topics are concerned, and what are the origins and definitions of the topic. Again, a very important idea. What are the key theories, concepts, and ideas? What are the main questions and problems? And then how is knowledge on this topic is structured and organized? And also how the various approaches to these questions increased our understanding and knowledge. So again, there are a lot of things that we can address via the literature review. But again, as Suzanne highlighted, we need to be very mindful and need to be deciding very cleverly where to draw the line, because we can't include a lot of literature in a paper and we can't include very little as well. So we need to learn to achieve the balance. Yeah. So in that sense, literature review actually serves a lot of purposes, as I have already highlighted before. For example, it helps us to sort of discover important variables, and it helps us to identify relationships, and also it helps us to rationalize what the significance of the research problem is, and also it will help us to enhance the subject vocabulary. And also it will help us to understand the structure of the subject. So in that sense, literature review actually forms a very important part of any paper that we write. But what is very important is synthesizing. This is where a lot of people do mistakes. For example, synthesis is actually the act of making connections between the parts identifying in the analysis. So it is very, very important. It is actually not a matter of reassembling the parts back to the original order, but looking for a new order. This is one of the mistakes that a lot of writers do. They say, you know, okay, author A has said this, author B has said that, author C has said this, and stop at that without actually bringing in your own analysis. It is really important to look for new orders and also to demonstrate the patterns based on what has already been published. This is really important. So in that sense, I suppose literature synthesis is a must in a good research paper. Without having good literature synthesis, it is highly unlikely that your paper will ever get published. So in that sense, synthesis requires a comprehensive knowledge of the subject and a capacity to think in broad terms. So once you look at the published literature, you should be able to analyze it and come up with new dimensions. Yeah. So, and also you should be able to control a large amount of data, and in doing so, you should not be afraid to come up with extreme suggestions and generalizations. So that is actually, once again, very, very important. And you need to bear in your mind that synthesis needs to be coherent and explicit, and it needs to provide clear links with the origins of the elements and to show how the connections were made. That is extremely important. Every little piece needs to be connected to each other. So when writing the literature review, of course, again, Suzanne highlighted this point already, but I want to re-emphasize that. Include only those work that is relevant to your research. This is very important. You know, do not include things that are not relevant at all. And also you need to be mindful about where to draw the line in terms of what sort of literature to include. And also you need to make sure that you read and you have understood the cited work very well. And also you need to organize your content according to the ideas and also according to the flow of the ideas that you're putting together. And do not simply quote or paraphrase the contents of published articles. This is extremely important. In that sense, literature synthesis is the term. You know, you really need to be a master of that to be a good writer. So in that sense, it is very important that you present your concepts in an order that will make sense in the context of your research project. And also sort of before you do that, you need to do some planning and put some effort into structuring your piece that you're writing. So in doing so, making an outline or plan is a good way to experiment with these different structures. As Suzanne also emphasized, different people use different structures. Some people start with the conclusion, some people start with the background. Both methods are okay, but you really need to invest time in identifying the best possible potential outline. So some of the tips on the structure. So the common error in literature review is to present material from one another, followed by information from another and then another. I emphasized that point already. So you need to highlight the synthesis rather than just descriptions. Yeah. So when authors disagree, always sort of linking words that indicate contrast will show you have how you have analyzed your work. And also it is really good to qualify an author's work in your write-up. And also sort of one of the major problems in literature reviews is that they are often written as standalone without links to the rest of the text. So you need to try and avoid that sort of situations. So these are some of the skill sets that you really need to develop to be a good writer. Information seeking skills, in identifying potential useful books and journals, and the ability to scan the literature. And also some of the analytical skills, such as identifying relationships between concepts, conceptualizing and synthesizing, and also reflecting the findings. And also you need to have reporting skills also, how best that you can present the outcomes in a proper paper, and also the right way in citing references. Again, sort of then move on to the research methods. I do not want to, actually, bearing in mind we are a little bit late in the time, I do not want to get into a lot of discussions on research methods and so on and so forth, because you will be covering these topics in the breakout sessions. But of course, the research method section in broad terms will describe the context and set in the study. So in my view, the right methodology is the backbone of any research and its related outputs. If you get the methodology wrong, the entire research strategy and the study can collapse. So just because you like a particular research method, it doesn't mean it will fit in with the research you are doing. So you really need to be mindful about that. And also you need to fully justify the method you are using with the reasons for its use. So then the research results. Of course, research results section is again very, very important, as already highlighted by Suzanne. Of course, it needs to sort of report the data collection mechanisms, and it needs to describe who the participants of the research are. And also it should present the key findings with respect to the central research question. And also it can actually present, depending on the circumstances, the secondary findings. And then the core of the research paper, the discussion, that actually will state the main findings of the study, and it can discuss the main results, and also it can discuss any policy and practical implications. And also in most of the situations, it offers perspectives for future research. So again, in terms of summarizing some of the points to consider in presenting the discussion, again, Suzanne highlighted some of these points, so I want to re-emphasize them. The content is really important. What is the message that you want to give? And also the style, the way that the message is presented, and also the form, the appearance of the message. And you need to be very mindful about the grammar, the punctuation, the usage, the spellings, and the format. So all these points are equally important. Then the references. I think some of the authors, I can't say most of the authors, they write papers really well, and then in putting the references together, they don't actually put a lot of effort into it, but this is also equally important. You need to make sure that all references that you have cited, including those in tables and figures, all are listed, no more, no less. Yeah? And also you need to use the consistent style throughout, as directed by the organizers, in this case, the conference organizers or the journal editors. So you really need to take every effort to get the right references. Yeah? And linking with that, plagiarism. This is very, very important. So I suppose, maybe some authors do it deliberately, some authors it happens without even you noticing. So, but what we all need to remember is that plagiarism is considered fraud. So you have to be very, very careful, and whenever you use what other people have already written, please make sure that you use the right referencing. Yeah, but it is in a peer review process, sometimes it is hard to detect, but there are tools. Increasingly, there are tools to check the similarity index. So because of that, please make sure that you use the right referencing styles and indices and so on and so forth, so that you do everything that you do in a paper in the most professional and ethical way. So just want to sort of cover some practical tips in you putting a paper together. The good starting point is study the current literature in your subject area and choose carefully. Get advice from colleagues who have published before, and also talk to their own experiences. This is a very good starting point. Over coffee and tea, and during your prayers, just have a good chat about where to publish. Yeah, and in doing so, you can actually have a look at good journals. Yeah, and also in doing so, have your own deadlines. This is very important, because if you have no deadlines, it is very easy for us to not to complete the paper, because we all are busy with so many other things. So always have deadlines. And also you need to be conservative in any claims made. You have to sort of, you shouldn't actually sort of say this is the best possible research. Claims like that is not conservative. So be conservative in the claims that you make. And also you can be generous in your references to previous literature. So use the right references in supporting your claims. So when you have a substantial paper published, it is always useful to pursue your theme with additional submissions. So do not stop with one paper. Make it more and do more publications, and study the style of papers published, and as far as possible, try and actually get rid of grammar and structural mistakes, as also highlighted by Suzanne during her keynote. And again, it is really important to follow the author guidelines provided in journals. Again, this is very simple, but still some authors completely ignore this. They do their own style and get their articles published. It is worth investing time in identifying what the journal is looking for, and particularly the word count. For example, lot of journals these days identify the maximum number of word count. So try and respect that. Again, some authors, irrespective of the journal, say 6,000 words maximum. They send papers with 15,000 words. It gives kind of the impression to the reviewers that you haven't actually followed the guidelines. So try to be respectful to the paper writing guidelines. Before you submit your articles, always do your own peer review. Again, Suzanne highlighted that point. Let someone else see it. Show a draft to one or more friends or colleagues and ask their comments. And also advise and ask for honest criticism. This will help you. And because the thing is, we are too close to our work and we don't see our own mistakes. Yeah, and always, I will emphasize this again and again, proof check thoroughly. The reviewers and the editors, when you see a paper with very common mistakes, it is very frustrating. So always make sure that your that your manuscript is with no incorrect spellings, no incomplete references, and so on and so forth. Yeah. So in that sense, ensure that the paper is checked and edited so that it reads in one voice. Yeah. Also, in doing so, exploit your individual strengths, demonstrate the authority and rigor of the research, and also and again, you know, Suzanne answered this as a response to a question. You need to agree and clarify order of appearance of authors as well in your paper. So in terms of targeting, many papers are rejected simply because they don't fulfill the expected requirements. They don't even go into the peer review process. For example, you know, as I sort of said, writing a journal paper is a good investment. Take that as a good investment and invest some time in evaluating your investment decisions. Yeah, identify few possible targets and find where to send your paper. Always, you know, you just drop an email to the editor and ask whether he or she will be happy to receive a paper along the lines that you want to write. You know, always get into that discussion with the editors. For example, you know, I receive so many emails per week, you know, asking various topics and various whether certain topics fit into the journal criteria and so on and so forth. In that sense, you can actually send an outline or abstract of your journal article to the editors or to the reviewers. Yeah. So you can actually, by doing so, you can confirm how an editor would like to see a potential submission. Yeah. So again, in terms of reviews, Suzanne touched base on this, but again, you know, I want to share some of the positive reviews here. You know, a very good paper, and you know, and some reviewers actually go and recommend certain other references, and also some reviewers just say very simply, well done. You know, so I think I'm sure we all are very happy to receive positive feedback. But having said that, there can be very negative feedback as well. And these are actually some of the very negative ones that I have seen. And these are, by the way, from real examples. You know, stringing a series of sentences that are each probably quite correct does not create a paper of any value. And the overriding impression is that this is what the author has done here. There has been inadequate critical review of the long list of references to make this paper worth accepting. Yeah. The amazing scramble of references in the first 4 lines is beyond belief in a serious research paper. So you can sort of see these actually have some negative tones. But what you can do is you can, in the first instance, you can avoid getting into a situation like this. But even if you get negative feedback, don't take them personally. So do not discourage upon refusal from editors. Deal with referees' comments in a completely detached manner. They are generally meant to be helpful and they are not personal. So it is hard to get negative feedback or rejections, but try and see the positive side of that. Yeah. So a request for revision is always good news. It really is. Yeah. So that means you are now in the publishing cycle. Nearly every published paper is revised at least once. I think that is the facts. In our journal, I think I can't imagine a single article that has been published as it is. Based on my memory. So do not worry about a request for revisions. That is actually really good news. So don't panic. Even if the comments are sharp or discouraging, they aren't personal. This is very, very important. It is very hard, particularly at your early stages of your career. You think, oh my God, you know, I have received this really bad feedback. Does it mean that the reviewers are not happy with me? They have something personal with me. Do not actually elaborate on those points. The comments are not meant to be personal. So how to revise your paper? acknowledge the editor and set a revision deadline, and also consult the colleagues and the co-authors and go through the points that they have raised. And always it is good to do a covering letter highlighting the issues that you have addressed and how you have addressed them. And it doesn't mean that if you don't agree with certain points, feel free to say so. It doesn't mean that you have to address every comment. Maybe that the reviewer has raised something that you disagree with. You know, make it clear, and then say so that in the cover letter. And also always try and meet the deadlines. But if your paper is rejected, you can always ask why and listen carefully and try again. Do not give up and keep trying. Always, rejection is you could be disappointed, but take it as a kind of a stepping stone for the next step. Yeah. So again, I suppose I want to highlight this also, so that the developing narrative about academic publications, for example, this is actually basically the next phase, because nowadays academics actually increase work with publishers to promote their context, and it goes as a cycle. And perhaps, I will leave at that, this, but I think you need to be a very experienced author to get into this cycle. But this will be useful for some of you in promoting your research, responding to feedback, submitting a manuscript, and also particularly in developing a media profile around your papers. So in that sense, publishing in academia is a particularly important career step, but like all things that are worthwhile, it takes time. I think we all need to remember that. It also gets easier with practice, so don't wait any longer. Start writing your paper straight away. Thank you very much. Any questions? Okay, so I think I can actually sort of see several questions, but with the timing, I do not know whether we have actually time to go through a lot of questions. But I will pick up one or two here. So is there a year limit for the data used in publication? For example, research conducted in 2019 and 2018. In my view, there is no hard and fast rule there. Depending on the subject, of course, with definitions and so on and so forth, you might have to go back to papers that were written in early 1923, for example, in certain subject fields. So there is no hard and fast rule, but you need to try and achieve the balance. As far as the data is valid and it adds value to your paper, you can use it. But always try and make sure that your paper reflects the most up-to-date state of the art. I think with that I will stop, bearing in mind that you need to go to the breakout rooms. So with that, I will actually invite Dr. Nuwan Dias to take the floor, and I think we have a short screen break. Perhaps Dr. Nuwan, if you can actually join in and brief people about the next session. Over to you, Dr. Nuwan.
Hello. Hi. Thank you, Dilanthi. I think we had scheduled a 15-minute screen break, but considering the time, I think we can have a 10-minute break if you want, but I think we can, if not, we can carry on. So any suggestions from any of you? If not, we will continue as it is, considering the time.
I think it's good to take a short break. So maybe give people 10 minutes, maybe come back at 10:10. And in fact, yes, I think it's for a break. So maybe should we keep it to the 15 minutes? So let's restart at it's 10:15 UK time, which is 4:15, I think, in Indonesia. So we'll resume at 4:15 in Indonesian time.
That's great. Thank you, Richard. Hello. Hello, good afternoon to our Indonesian colleagues, and still it's a good morning to our UK colleagues. I hope we can start the breakout sessions, but I can see on the chat that there's a need for a pre-break. I understand that the screen break we already had is utilized for the pre-break, so we will move on with the move on with the, as planned with the program session. So if there is any issue, please let us know in the chat box. So I'm not going to take much time on introducing what this session is, but I will just brief you on what this event is about and how we are going to structure this. So I'm going to share my screen for you. Great. I think you all can see my screen. So this is actually the breakout groups on structuring a manuscript. So Nuan Dias from the Global Disaster Resilience Center, University of Huddersfield. I suppose I have been in contact with you in past few days, sending emails, and also you should have received at least one email from me in the past few days. So here, what the key idea is now since the morning through the keynote and from Professor Dilanthi's speech, we got the idea on how to do a breakout group, how to structure a manuscript. So now here the program is how we actually trying to discuss it within the participants itself. So the plan is we have defined the groups like this. So again, the scope is to have a discussion on structuring a scientific paper and report them into the main plenary. We have already divided pre-groups, predefined groups. I'm sure all of you are aware about the groups that you are in. So the groups are introduction and conclusion group, literature review group, methodology group, results and discussion group, title and keywords group. So all of you are aware about your groups, and each group have got a facilitator and a rapporteur. So they will be coordinating the group event. So the key idea is, now if we take some practical example, when we do our studies or when we do a virtual physical event, normally after a lecture that we have a group discussion. So this is the exact same thing in an online format. So what we expect is that this is your platform to discuss what you have been discussing since the morning. So once you are in group, the facilitator and the rapporteur, they will just coordinate the group, and we would expect the participation of everyone, and be an active participant, and try to bring your ideas into the assigned group, and then after that we will be presenting them into the plenary. And with that, I would like to introduce the breakout room facilitators and rapporteurs. So we have, for the breakout room 1, Georgina Clegg from the University of Huddersfield, and Konza Indana Sulfa from Indonesia, Institute of Technology, Bandung. And for the breakout room 2, we have, that is literature review, Asita De Silva from University of Huddersfield, and Devi from Indonesia, Institute of Technology, Bandung. And for breakout room 3, we have Dr. Chaturangani Chakodi from University of Huddersfield, and Ganesha from Institute of Technology, Bandung. And for breakout room 4, we have Lillian Smart from University of Huddersfield, and Dr. Faisal Rohmat from Institute of Technology, Bandung. And for group 5, we have Shavendra Nisankar from University of Huddersfield, and Devina Corinne Sua from Institute of Technology, Bandung. So they will be facilitating and supporting your the discussion, but the discussion is all participants of the group. So So the structure is, again, if I briefly explain, each group will have approximately about 23 participants in your group. And after this introduction, you will be automatically directed to the breakout group. So don't worry, you will be taken back there, taken to that breakout room. So approximately we have allocated 50 minutes for the breakout group session. So with the breakout group session, you continue the discussion, and at the end, when it's close to the time, you will be again automatically directed to the main session. So therefore, just keep an eye on the timer. There will be a timer displayed, and a message will be appearing saying that that you are going to end the breakout room and you are going to join the main session. So be careful about the time, because you will have to manage your whole discussion within that time framework. Otherwise, you will be end up with linking with the main session. So I am not going through all these areas, because actually from Keynote and as well as from Dilanthi's very comprehensive presentation, you got how to do these things. So these are some hints for you to work on, to discuss on each and aspect: introduction and conclusion, literature review, methodology, results and discussion, and title, keywords and abstract. So you can build up your discussions on these as a guidance document. Your facilitator of your group has already received this guidance note as a concept note. So what you can do is you can start the discussion. They will help you to start the discussion. And again, what I have to tell is, so it's your time to bring in your ideas and make this discussion very effective and a fruitful one. So we can present this to the main plenary after this discussion. So the assigned rapporteur for each group will present these findings, and then the whole audience will be able to share the ideas that have been discussed in the group discussion. And for that, we have allocated about 8 minutes for each group. That is in the next session. When we start in the group feedback to the plenary, we have allocated 8 minutes each group. So with that, I think I would like to conclude the guidance and the structure of this session. So with this, you will be directed now to the groups, and enjoy your time and make this discussion very fruitful. I'm sure this will be an enjoyable experience. Thank you, everyone.